My brothers and sisters, the morning our government servers went dark, I knew we were at war. Not with roaring jets or rumbling tanks, but with something quieter, invisible, and lethal. At 4:37 a.m., my intelligence chief woke me with words that still ring in my ears. Captain, we're under a coordinated digital assault. 3 government servers down, our state banking systems frozen, the energy grid flickering like a failing heartbeat. The message was simple: bow down, or watch your country crumble in the shadows. But they misjudged us. Instead of panic, I felt clarity. This was no accident. It was retaliation. 7 days earlier, I had canceled our telecommunications contract with Israeli defense contractors, a $500 million, 5-year deal. Our engineers had combed through 47 pages of specifications and found what no government should accept: backdoors, kill switches, surveillance protocols capable of listening to every call, reading every text, tracing every digital transaction. In Burkina Faso, we were not buying infrastructure. We were buying our own digital colonization. When I informed their ambassador, his reply was cold: Captain Traore, stability is fragile. We hope you reconsider before it's too late. 72 hours later, our servers were under attack. It wasn't only about us. Intelligence showed a wider pattern across the continent. In Ghana, so-called free cybersecurity training that installed monitoring software. In Kenya, agricultural drones that mapped gold deposits while pretending to boost crop yields. In Nigeria, telecom upgrades that came with permanent foreign access. They called it Operation ArcNet. A continent-wide web of technological dependence dressed up as development aid. Control the infrastructure. Control the nation. Colonialism returned in code instead of bayonets. Watching our systems burn, I realized they attacked not because we were weak, but because we were growing strong. The shock was not just the cyber assault, it was the sudden disappearance of supposed allies. 3 African presidents who privately backed our review went silent overnight. One canceled a regional summit. Another issued a statement praising Israeli-African partnerships. The third stopped taking my calls. Digital colonialism doesn't only knock out systems. It isolates you politically, poisons global perception, and makes potential partners wary. Within 6 hours, Western outlets sang from the same hymn sheet: instability, isolation, extremist infiltration. Same day, same narrative, a coordinated character assassination. This is information warfare at its most sophisticated. But let me tell you about Fatou, who runs a tiny electronics stall in Ouagadougou's central market. When I announced our telecom review, she asked one thing that cut through all the geopolitical noise: Captain, will this make my phone more expensive? That, not the grand theories or the headlines, is the real battlefield, not in conference rooms in Paris or boardrooms in Tel Aviv. This battle is in the hands of ordinary Burkinab, who need technology that serves them, not spy systems that watch them. Fatou deserves a phone network that guards her privacy, not one that hands every call to foreign intelligence. Her children deserve internet access that teaches and empowers, not platforms that harvest their data for profit. Her future depends on technology that frees Africa, not on systems that keep us tethered. The fight for digital sovereignty is not abstract. It is personal. It decides whether the next generation will own their digital destiny or remain tenants in somebody else's technological empire. What our attackers failed to foresee was that striking Burkina Faso would expose the continent, wide machine of control they'd spent decades assembling. Other leaders began to connect dots they had ignored. Mali's president called in confidence. We see what they're doing. Our telecom deals are under review too. Niger's leader reported offers of free cyber training. When they refused, their satellite links started failing. In Chad, questions about mining contracts were suddenly followed by financing delays. By the 3rd day, something extraordinary was unfolding. Ghana announced full reviews of foreign tech partnerships. Tanzania moved to require government oversight of foreign agricultural drones. Kenya quietly added sovereignty clauses while renegotiating infrastructure deals. The digital blow meant to isolate Burkina Faso instead woke the continent. Then they crossed a line that changed everything. Our ambassador in Paris received an unofficial visit, not threats, but photographs his daughter at university in London, his wife at morning prayers, his elderly father at the market. "We hope the captain's family stays safe in these uncertain times," they said and left. When my ambassador relayed this, a feeling I'd only known on northern battlefields returned a cold, pure rage. They had dragged families into a political war. They had revealed who they truly were. That night, walking my compound, I thought of every African leader removed for being inconvenient. Gaddafi, Sankara, Lumumba. The pattern repeats: isolation, destabilization, elimination. But I also thought of millions of young Africans who deserve nations that control their own fate. Of my grandfather's soil, stained hands, and the future we could build if we stopped accepting crumbs from tables where we were the meal. Look at the numbers they don't want you to see. Each year, African countries send roughly $50 billion to foreign tech firms for services we could develop ourselves. We export raw materials and buy back finished goods at markups that would make even the greediest dealer blush. Now imagine what changes when we own our digital backbone: Nigerian banks moving money to Kenyan firms without American sign-offs, Ethiopian researchers sharing data with South African universities free of European oversight, governments storing critical records on African servers powered by African renewables and defended by African cybersecurity. This is more than independence. It is reclaiming agency. It's about keeping African wealth in African hands, creating jobs for African engineers, and building solutions for African problems. Instead of exporting raw materials and importing finished technology, we should construct whole supply chains: mining, manufacturing, software development. Rather than sending billions in licensing fees to Silicon Valley, we can nurture our own tech industries. The morning after the threats to my family, I made a decision that would reshape the region. I summoned West African leaders not by formal diplomacy, but with direct, personal calls, urgent invitations to confer on regional security. 14 heads of state arrived in Ouagadougou within 48 hours. In a secure room, I laid everything bare: the cyber attacks, the economic pressure, the coordinated media campaign, the family intimidations, the full scope of Operation ArcNet. "Brothers," I said, "what happened here this week is a blueprint of what they will do to any of us who step out of line. Do we accept this new colonialism, or do we answer as one?" The discussion ran for 7 hours. Some argued for diplomacy, others feared economic backlash, until testimonies began to pour in. One country after another described similar pressure for daring to choose technological independence. What looked like isolated incidents was actually a single, coordinated continental strategy. By evening, we had a decision. 14 nations pledged something unprecedented: the African Digital Sovereignty Initiative, joint cybersecurity protocols, shared intelligence on foreign interference, independent technological development, and mutual support for any member facing digital or economic retaliation. 6 months later, I received an encrypted message from Tel Aviv. Not a threat, but a request for talks. I showed it to my defense minister. "What do you think they want?" he asked. I smiled for the first time in months. They wanted to negotiate. The balance had shifted. When one country can be isolated, threats work. But when 14 stand together and say, "Isolate all of us," the calculus changes. You cannot try to destabilize half a continent without destabilizing yourself. The meeting never materialized. Instead, the tone of contact shifted: trade delegations asking about fair partnerships, tech firms offering knowledge, transfer programs along with contracts, investment funds proposing joint ventures with real African ownership. The language had changed because the balance of power had. 3 months into our continental alliance, a young woman walked into my office. About 25, carrying a laptop, speaking perfect French, with no security detail and no diplomatic credentials. "Captain Traore," she said, "my name is Sarah. I'm a software engineer from Tel Aviv, and I'm here to apologize." She had worked on the very systems used against us. The backdoors in telecom equipment, the flaws in banking software. "I was told it was for counterterrorism," she said. "When I saw what it did to your country, I understood. I hadn't built protection. I had built control." She stayed 3 days, walked our tech teams through the exact mechanics of the infiltration, and helped us uncover vulnerabilities we hadn't even suspected. When I asked why she'd come to help, her answer was plain: my grandfather survived the Holocaust. He would be ashamed of what Israel has become. I choose to remember what it was meant to be. Her defection wasn't unique. Engineers around the world began choosing conscience over contracts. Former NSA contractors revolted against cyber imperialism. European hackers framed digital sovereignty as a human right, and Asian programmers recognized the patterns of technological colonization. The African Digital Sovereignty Initiative stopped being merely defensive. It became a beacon for anyone who believed technology should free people, not dominate them. By year's end, we had built something extraordinary: an alternative internet, our own satellite network, indigenous data centers and protocols. For the first time in the digital era, Africa could talk to itself without foreign oversight. Young people abandoned WhatsApp for AfroHat, an encrypted messenger made by African engineers. They moved from Facebook to Ubuntu Social, prioritizing community over surveillance. Governments shifted from Amazon Web Services to a continental cloud consortium. But the biggest victory was psychological. I knew we'd won when my 15-year-old nephew asked, "Uncle, why do Americans use such old tech? Their internet is so slow compared to ours, and their privacy laws are terrible. Why haven't they upgraded to African standards?" A child pitying America for technological backwardness marked a revolution decades in the making. We hadn't just gained independence, we'd achieved superiority. The global reaction was predictable. Western think tanks raised alarms about technological nationalism. Intelligence agencies muttered about digital balkanization, and tech CEOs warned Congress about threats to global connectivity. But the demonstration effect was irreversible. If Africans could build safer, fairer tech than Silicon Valley, what did that say about assumed Western superiority? Other regions took notice. Latin American nations built regional networks. Southeast Asian states launched homegrown social platforms, and European privacy advocates pushed back against American surveillance capitalism. The digital world was decolonizing. 1 year after the attacks, I received a different message from Tel Aviv, not from officials, but from engineers for digital justice. "We built the systems used against you," they wrote. They apologized and offered to help dismantle what they had made. They sent technical specs for surveillance systems deployed across 23 African countries, banking backdoors, government network flaws, hidden telecom access points, and, crucially, source code for countermeasures. Within months, African cyber teams had scrubbed decades of embedded foreign surveillance. Government networks were secured, banking systems hardened, and a continent reclaimed its digital future. Communications infrastructure was liberated. For the first time since the birth of the internet, a whole continent stood digitally free. European intelligence agencies, trying their usual surveillance of African governments, now find themselves locked out. American corporations attempting to harvest African user data run into impenetrable privacy protocols. Foreign security companies offering their services are politely told Africa builds its own. The hunters became the hunted, the colonizers decolonized, the surveillors stripped of their power to surveil. When I tell young Africans about that morning our servers went dark, they struggle to see it as a crisis. They live in a world where African technology sets global standards, where other continents send delegations to study our sovereignty model. Their questions show how much has changed. Why did we ever let outsiders control our communications? Why did we store data abroad? Why didn't we build our own internet from the beginning? I tell them the digital freedom they take for granted was earned by leaders who refused to bow, engineers who chose conscience over contracts, and people who believed sovereignty was worth any price. The cyber attacks of August 28, 2025 were meant to punish Africa for defiance. Instead, they revealed the cost of dependence. They were meant to drag us back into digital colonialism. Instead, they pushed us into liberation. The morning our servers collapsed, we discovered we didn't need their systems nearly as much as they needed our obedience. The moment they tried to isolate us, we realized we could connect directly with one another. The instant they sought to control us through technology, we understood we could claim our own technological destiny. This is the lesson for every people, every nation, every generation. Independence is not given, it is taken. Sovereignty is not granted, it is claimed. Freedom is not donated, it is built. They did not drop bombs on Burkina Faso that morning, but they did drop something else. The mask, the illusion that their domination was inevitable. What they revealed instead was fear. Fear that the old ways of controlling Africa were dying. Fear of a future where they would have to relate to us as equals. That morning they showed us their weakness. We showed them our strength. Not strength to destroy, but strength to build. Not strength to attack, but strength to defend. Not strength to dominate, but strength to be free. The servers that went offline came back stronger, fortified, untouchable. The grid that once flickered now runs on African, built smart systems immune to foreign intrusion. The banking systems once frozen now operate on networks no outside power can manipulate. We built more than independence. We built superiority, more than sovereignty. We forged supremacy. They tried to teach us resistance was futile. Instead, we learned resistance was the only path to freedom, country or death. We chose, and in choosing, we discovered we could have both country and life, sovereignty and prosperity, independence and innovation. The question is no longer whether you will choose, but when you do, will it be dignified independence or permanent dependence on systems designed to keep you small? The servers hum, the networks hold, the continent is united, and we are free.